Good morning, CSL Palm Desert and beyond. How is everyone this beautiful Monday morning? Here we are. I'm in the desert. I'm actually in my office today. I've left my green screen at home, sorry, the office, so I forgot about that. So you don't see the beautiful desert background, but you get to see the middle of my office. So good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm glad you're here. We have an exciting lesson today. This is one of those lessons that, for me, when I began embarking upon my spiritual journey, I realized I was doing something in 180, totally in reverse. I was doing something incorrectly. I wasn't doing something in the spiritual, the way to follow a spiritual law to make the law increase for my life. So as I go through this chapter today, I think it's going to be interesting to see how you feel about this law of increase and whether you've been using it correctly or not. We've approached it several times, throughout my career when I talk on Sundays and on Thanksgiving services and things like that about how to approach this law of increase. But sometimes we forget about it because we roll back into our own human function. We roll back to our own humanity, and we forget that some of these things work a little bit differently than we anticipate, or that we think in a logical way, in a head way. But if we look at it differently, and we see how the law responds to this cause and effect relationship, then we will be able to understand and implement it and actually have it increase every area of our life. So today is about the law of increase. Once again, I'm reading from Raymond Hallowell's book, Working with the Law. And this is chapter 6, the law of increase. So here we go. If you have any questions or comments, please put those, whatever platform you're using, just pop in there and I'll make sure I'll try my best to get to them. And I'm just glad you're here. So welcome. Here we go. The law of increase. Without exception, I believe everyone has read or heard the delightful story of Aladdin and his magical lamp. How a poor boy had stumbled upon a little genie who led him to find a dusty old lamp. It was a magic lamp. When he rubbed it briskly, a little man appeared out of a cloud before him and asked to fill his wishes. We as children have always dreamed of fairies and that of beautiful things in life that wish we could have, yet many of our dreams remained as such because we could do nothing about them. In truth, we may not believe in fairies, but we do know there is a principle equivalent to the magic lamp. So I love the way he uses that example about Aladdin. He starts out there and says, you know what? We all saw that movie where, you'd rub the lamp and suddenly, poof, a genie would appear and say, your wish is my command. What would you wish? What do you want? And, I'm sure that as a kid, actually as an adult, I've talked about this several times and I actually would train. I'm like, what would you do if suddenly some sort of a presence showed up and said, hey, look, you get 3 wishes. What do you want? How would you narrow down the scope of your desires? Of course, people say, well, I would wish for 5 more wishes or 10 more wishes or unlimited wishes. But if you could only contemplate and say, this is what I want, would you even be ready to articulate that? That's the first question for you. So we have this mystical power. It's not magical. It's a mystical power. It's a spiritual power. It's a power in the universe that looking at us saying, what would you like? And it constantly is listening to our desires. Okay. So we already have this genie in a bottle kind of a concept when we start working with the spiritual law. So let's set that forward. Here we go. No, it is not something material we can carry around or rub to find a little genie to do our bidding. It is an understanding which enables us to use the law more clearly. And in using it, we stimulate our good and bring about much for our pleasure and happiness that seems like magic or miracles. So it does have this perception that it feels like it's almost magical or that it's, somehow a miracle that these things happen. But when you get used to using these spiritual laws and applying them in every area of your life, what you'll find is miracles are not miracles. They're the rule. That's what's supposed to be happening. We're supposed to live in a life that is abundant and happy and healthy and have wonderful relationships. We're meant to be that way. So we're meant to experience the goodness. It's interesting to look back, and I'm kind of in the middle of my own experience, and it's interesting while I'm wandering, well, kind of wallowing at times, while I'm wandering down this pathway, seeing how there's things that look really synchronistic. It's like, wait, that's a real coincidence that this happened, or real coincidence that happened. No, it's not actually. It's because I'm using the spiritual laws. And so I should never question them when one begins to experience those things and say, hey, is that sort of like, a miracle? No, it's to be expected. Dr. Joe, there is a core question we should begin with. What kind of deciding which place Which piece of candy? That's right. What kind of like deciding which piece of candy to buy with a nickel? I remember that. Remember when your parents would give you some money and you could go to like the store and look at this whole candy shop, and you went, yeah, and all of it was up to you. And now here's what's interesting about that. I like that comment, Jeff. Thank you. But what's really interesting about that is, as a kid, once you found a certain candy that you liked, you stopped looking at all the others and you only focused on the one, and you never expanded into something else, unless by default someone had something that they wanted to give you, and that was the very first time you tasted it, and you were like, oh my God, I've been buying this the whole time, and this is amazing over here. This is actually better. But we get into a rut. We're going to talk about that too, but through this law of increase, we get into a rut and we don't expand our horizons. We just use what's in front of us and keep doing the same thing, going to the same restaurants, go buying the same things off the restaurant menu. We get into this rut. So thank you, Jeff. I love that analogy. All right, here we go. Here's one of the clues. All right, here's one of the steps in realizing this. This understanding is the act of praising God, the law, for that which we desire, and invariably the fulfillment of that desire is speeded up to almost magic proportion. All right, now here's the key to the law of increase. He's coming right out of the gate. It's about gratitude. It's about giving thanks to something. It's about giving thanks for that which you want in your life, actually giving thanks for it in this moment, not waiting for it to arrive, but being grateful for its presence in your life. And that speeds up the entire process. When you see yourself in that position, or you see yourself in a relationship, or you see yourself physically in a health situation, when you see yourself and you affirm those qualities for yourself, the process begins to speed up, because the universe, you've made that declaration that this is mine. This is mine now. And so the universe speeds up to a point where suddenly all these things begin to happen. And you say to yourself, you know what? I've just been thinking about this, and poof, it happened. Of course it did. Of course it did, because it's what's been on your mind. So it's a beautiful idea. Here we go. Praise has ever been a common method used to employ the attention, favor, and blessing of God. However, one believed in it. Okay, so praise has always been a common theme. And now I had a hard time putting my arms around this, because it kind of sounded like there was this God with personality. This sentence in this actually paragraph that it says to employ the attention, right, favor and blessing of God. So I almost felt like, if I'm not doing this, am I in the favor and blessing and attention of God? And the answer was yes, but it was not using to my maximum potential the possibilities of implementing the spiritual law to get even more of what I desire in my life. So at first I thought when I read this, I thought, well, why would Raymond say this? Why would Dr. Hollowell say in the favor of God? Because I think that sort of makes it sort of personal and random. And then we have a thing called, our value and worthiness, and all of this stuff starts circulating in our head. So I was processing that. And in processing that particular term that I wanted to share with you, I realized that I'm always in favor in the law. I'm always, it's how I'm directing it. It's how I'm achieving the blessing around it. That's what's most important. Okay, he goes on to say this. In early history, we learned that people would bring their sacrifices and place them on the altar to gain the favor of Jehovah. Following this act, they would render their praise in song and ceremony, believing that so by doing, they would be favored, their prayers would be granted. Read the Song of Moses and note its structure. Read all of the fall of Jericho and note the process used by the people who marched about the cities until the wall crumbled and fell, and who became conquerors. Read the last Psalm of David, and in doing so, remember that it's been used by the Hebrews for ages and has proven most effective throughout the centuries. The singing of songs and the blowing of trumpets does not bring the results you pray for, nor do you suddenly gain favor with God because of it. The effect of your efforts does not influence God in that sense, but it does influence you. It enables you to be lifted up and unconsciously touch the law and gain its blessing. What has been an unconscious or accidental method can become known fact and regular means of stimulating your good. So let me unpack that, because this whole, I'm reading a lot because this is a really meaty chapter as well. So what he's saying is, if you look back in the biblical history, and he's just referring to biblical histories, and then he talks about the Jewish tradition. When you look back at that, we see that there's been this process of believing in oneself and one's status and value within the whole of the universe. And when one acknowledges that and acknowledges that presence, that's the one within, when one acknowledges that, it opens up the doors of possibility, because there is this idea in our head that it is possible and we can access this and it can be exactly what we want it to be. So when one opens the door of their consciousness, that's when we realize this is a great possibility. All right? Any questions? Pop them up. If one learns the simple method of praise, that alone will stimulate and increase his good. Jesus once said, if one has faith as a grain of mustard seed, he can move mountains. If one can realize the power of praise, we can do the same. Praise is complementary to faith. Listen to this. I love this, because he has this like little, this is complementary to that. So check this out. Praise is complementary to faith. Whereas faith is wisdom and understanding, praise is the application of that understanding. So if faith is the wisdom and understanding, then praise is the application of that understanding. Faith is the boiler that holds a substance of power, whereas praise is the fuel that generates that power into an active force. Okay, this is great. So faith is the machine and praise is the fuel. Okay? And when we have faith, and when we know that we know, and when we know that we know, and we have this acknowledgement and this realization and this vision in our mind, when we know that, we are working the machine. And now, once we got the machine working on our behalf, because we've stated what we want, not what we don't want, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. When we state what we want, and then we start giving thanks that it's already done, that in praise, and say, thank you, God, for this beautiful blessing. And we also give blessings. We thank all of the blessings that we have in their totality. Whatever you praise increases. Okay. So this is to me, that was a really good, that message right there. Whereas faith is wisdom and understanding. Okay. Praise is the application of that understanding. Faith is the boiler that holds a substance of power, whereas praise is the fuel that generates. I love that. All right. If you must constantly watch your boiler, listen to this. If you must constantly watch your boiler and care especially for the fuel that that charges it, in order to get the most out of it, then the fuel is a very important part of that machinery. In like manner, faith without praise is but a cold boiler, an inert mass of machinery. It may be nice to look at or to talk about, but of no value more than until it is put into motion and produces. Woo! So now we know that there's this, what he calls it a machine. It's perfect. It's a machine and it's beautiful. And people study about the machine and they read books about this machine called the universal laws. And they're always gazing at the machine and praying to the machine, hoping that it does something, instead of understanding that the machine will only work when you fuel it with this idea of praise. Okay, here we go. Any questions? Pop them up, please. Let me know you're there. All right. Praise is a stimulant of the mind. It quickens prayer and it magnetizes all the good around you. It transforms that good into usable, visible substance. Now, here's the question that I always had when I was in class. I said, that's really nice. And I hear you. And I'm going to do this. But it seems like when I do it, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm not changing. I know it's mine. But I'm like, when is this going to happen? Come on. When is this going to happen? And so I always want to jumpstart this process. I want the machine to work faster. But in my own humanity, I need to understand that the machine works with such precision and such perfect timing that I can't push the machine to work any faster. The machine is always working at 100%. And I need to accept the fact that some things in life take a little bit more time to figure out. Okay? All right. We're moving. All right. All right. I'm going to read this one. It's an example, but I like the way he uses this example. All right. Hey, Carol Templeton, welcome. I'm glad you're listening. Good to see you. All right. A woman was crying bitterly and praying tearfully to God for her release. The master, hearing her, silenced her and said, "Is your God a God of tears, of grief and anguish and pain?" No, God is a giver of joy and peace and happiness and love. You want joy, peace, happiness, and love, and yet you pray to your Father with tears. If you want black, do you ask for white? If you ask for a fish, do you expect a serpent? If you ask for bread, do you expect a stone? You only get what you expect, for the unchanging law is ever working to supply you. Prayer should not be one of supplication, pleading, begging, entreating, a sad state. It should be one of claiming, declaring, decreeing, praising, and a joyful thanksgiving. Okay, here we go. So when I'm in pain, what do? I'm praying from a place of pain, not from a place of praise. It's essential that I look and go, let's shift from this idea that we have to come from a place of pain in order to generate this good in our life. Good morning, Alfie. Glad you're here. When we have this idea of when we pray from a place of pain, and it's easy because we're there, we're not praying in something good. We're trying to pray something out. And here's the essence. We never pray anything out. We only pray the right stuff in. So through praise, we put the right fuel in the machine that then generates our good. If not, we're putting the wrong fuel in the machine, and the machine pushes out something that's somewhat more dysfunctional, more difficult, more challenging. So if you find yourself yielding results, okay, one has to understand that maybe it's the fuel you're putting into the machine, okay? It's the stuff you're putting in instead of the praise, you're putting in the problem. Does that make sense? I should write that down. Instead of praise, you're putting in the problem. Write that down. Put that in my book, somebody, okay? All right, moving right along. When we bring happiness, okay, it is a well-known fact that even plant life is responsive to praise. For I've seen flowers praised to longer life and beauty. When we are praised or praise ourselves, there is a physical response within our bodies. Doctors tell us that the cells of our bodies respond to the law. They seem to know and to expand in strength, in capacity, and even in intelligence, okay? Of course, we know that it is the mind working through every cell that causes expansion. Hey, welcome, Linda. We're glad you're here too. So here we go. When we praise ourselves, okay, so this is one of those things that we can practice. You know, and I find myself doing this. In fact, I find myself doing this, you know, regularly, looking in the mirror going, oh my God, and then, oh my God. And then I start to feel really badly about myself, and I look down at my belly and I think, oh, and I look at these arms, they're not doing what I want them to do. And so I start going into this, oh, good morning, David. I start going into this state of mind where instead of praising my body and its function, I begin to just be really critical about it and critical what I'm not able to do. Instead of being blessed by all the things that are working in my body, I am obsessed, right? I become obsessed with the things that are not. And so the fuel that I'm putting into the machine isn't one of praising this body that functions beautifully. And yeah, I have a little receding hair, not a little, I have a receding hairline, and I have all these other, we all have little things, right? But when I look at the aggregate of my body, I'm like, I need to be very grateful and praise this beautiful body and know that this is exactly what I want to carry me through this life experience. Instead of picking all the little things and all those things that need to be fixed, I need to get away from that. We can get away from that and into the, I love my body, I love myself. He goes on, this is great. And praise, the cells begin to listen to that. They listen when you tell the body, I don't feel good. and you affirm it, and then you call all your friends to tell them you don't feel good, what you're doing is you're almost changing the chemical composition of your body to make sure and to secure that you will not feel good, right? You think maybe by articulating that to people, suddenly when I say it enough, it will rid itself from my body. But that's not how the way the law works. That's not how it works for us. When we do the right thing comes into our body. When we repeatedly do the wrong thing, we can expect the wrong results within our body, in our affairs, okay? Moving right along. When we praise the richness and opulence of God, the law, our thoughts are greatly increased in the mental atmosphere. This increase affects our being in that it reflects in everything our mind and hands may touch. If we are contracting our thought through fear, criticism, and complaint, we reflect that contradiction and our results are delayed or even frozen. Okay, so that means when times are tough and we're told to buckle down and pull yourself up by the bootstraps, one has to acknowledge that by using the law in this way, if I turn into that human being and that human posture of criticizing or complaining, all I'm doing is I am extending my life in that situation. I'm basically renewing my lease in that situation for an hour, a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade. I know people that renew their lease for suffering almost every day, because almost every day it is the subject of complaint and criticism, their life. So how can one expect the universe to respond in such a way when this is all the fuel that we're putting into the machine? So don't extend the lease that you have with suffering, criticism, and pain. That is a lease that needs to be terminated, not just delayed, but terminated. Because the longer you sit in that place of judgment for yourself, expect more of the same to come rushing into your life. All right, here we go. Whether the changes are in inanimate things or in individuals, it matters not so long as the desired results are obtained. The law works without discrimination. So he's talking about this. That's just a little indicator for me. Whether the changes are inanimate objects, right? Which to me, in fact, I was just talking with someone about this yesterday. I was talking about how it's not so much the things, but it's the emotion of the things that we continue to bring in and out of our life, including people. Many times we will have an emotional connection to a person that is a very positive, loving experience. Likewise, sometimes we get into relationships and have associations with things that are not positive and free-flowing and loving. And when one rids themselves of that energy and realizes that that energy that you're aligning with, that's taking you away from the pathway of your good, when one realizes that I need to minimize, sometimes we can't eliminate, but we can minimize our exposure to it and also minimize how much it gets into our body, into our head. When we can minimize that and maximize the potential of our understanding of what the universe provides through this law of increase, then we will benefit from this. That will begin to change. Things will begin to shift. Now, that other person's not going to shift. Don't expect someone else to shift because you're shifting. Your shifting is for you, not for them. So when you approach your life in that perfect place, right, and you come from that life in the perfection of God, knowing that all of these things are mine and I continue to grow with them and expand with them, when one begins to understand that the negative people around you, what they say, it's kind of like water off the back of a duck's back. It just kind of goes right back. It goes right off. It's Teflon. You don't let it stick to you. All right? Moving right along. But better still, through praise is good for other persons and things is our salvation too. Praise changes our observation, our whole outlook of life. In the past, we were in the habit of seeing our weaknesses and failings as well as the shortcomings of others, but now we see differently. We look at the accomplishments, the good, and the beauty that is worthy of our praise. This, in turn, has a dual effect, right? Excuse me. It enriches our human self, and we are able to radiate praise, joy, courage, and happiness to all who are affected by our influence. It affects our inner self in such a way that our memory begins to retain all praiseworthy thoughts sent to it. All right, so here's an example. Prime example. Have you ever talked to a family member? And I'm going to put a disclaimer here. Mom, this is not about you. If she's watching. My family, this is not about you. Just putting that out there. So I'm going to give this disclaimer. I have to give that disclaimer first, because have you ever had a conversation with someone about things that happened in your childhood, and you were telling them about these events that for you were strongly held memories? You held on to them, and they weren't good. And the person that you're talking to is like, I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. I didn't do that. What are you talking about? Have you ever had that? And then what I noticed is, as a parent, the things that our daughter remembers, some of the things, she'll bring up to me and she'll say, did you know? I was like, well, you used to do this when I was a kid. And I'm like, God, I don't remember that. I don't remember that part of it. Because by human nature, we don't tend to dwell and hold on to those things unless you are the recipient of those things. The person who administers the stuff that we become the recipient of, many times they don't hold on to those emotions, but man, we do, right? We don't remember them because, and if we were the person who was dishing it out, so to speak, we don't remember because our memory wants to only remember the good stuff that happened, right? Our memory is inclined to focus on the good and not the bad. Unless, of course, we want to put the fire underneath the bad, then it does keep that burning. But in reality, in the truth of things, when we look at things like that in our life, when we're the ones that will say, I don't remember doing that, and I think the key is to say, I don't remember doing that, but if I did, I'm really sorry, because that is certainly not how I wanted that to play out in your life's process. When it's brought to your attention, take care of it. Don't just blow it off as if it didn't happen, because probably if this person has a very vivid memory of this and it impacted them emotionally, perhaps it's one of those things that you yourself just kind of checked out and don't remember, right? Because it didn't flow into the good of your life. You just did something to correct something and you didn't think twice about it. I think it's imperative that if that did happen to this person and they articulate it, or it happens to me and articulate it to you, that you at least acknowledge the fact that maybe for me, that was my perception of it and that wasn't your intention. So I think it's an important spiritual practice that when someone calls you out on something that they believe you did to harm them, that you acknowledge that with wisdom and say, yes, okay, I don't remember that, or I don't remember it that way, but if that is the way you remember it, I have to say, I'm sorry that was not my intention. That healing effort, that healing balm, that act of forgiveness and that asking for forgiveness is really, really important to the person who's feeling those feelings. Okay. So I hope that helps a little bit. All right. There we go. This sets up a new system of thinking, and gradually the old thoughts that we're destroying become absorbed in the new ones. Thus, it becomes habitual to think praises, and our life takes on the likeness of all good that is worth praising. Praise with the heart is far more vital and effectual than praise with the head or praise with the lips. Praise does not flatter nor influence God. It is as it does some humans who are turned by superficial praise and applause. Praise is not intended for God. It is intended only for the person and is an aid to enable us to lift ourselves upwards to become attuned with the law of God. It raises his or her state of consciousness so that they may become more receptive to the good about them and lifts them up above the lack of it. Praise raises our vibration, speeds up activity, stimulates our faith, and contacts a higher realm of thought. So let's unpack this. It's not about praise with your lips, not about saying it, right? It's not about coming from the head. It has to come from the heart. There has to be a joyous, emotional connection of praise, okay, of thanksgiving. God is not impressed by the people who are able to who verbalize this thing, this concept, or they talk about this, or that this is not about impressing this spiritual energy. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with just raising your consciousness to that place of praise. Okay, it says that it raises our state of consciousness so that we may be more receptive to the good that's already around us. We were out driving yesterday, and I was looking at March and April in the desert are beautiful. And they're really beautiful. I remember this from many years that we've been here. And it isn't until recently that I've taken time to really notice how beautiful and full the flower beds are up and down the valley. You know, the country clubs, the entrance to the neighborhoods and things like that. The beauty is overwhelming. But if I never took time to notice it and give thanks for it, then it becomes something that I just pass by, and I miss living in this thing that is called beauty, right? And revealing its beauty to me. I just ignore it because I'm not even aware of it. I want us to become aware, not just of the things we desire and we're giving thanks and using the machine to bring it into our life, but also what is around us right now that is worthy of saying thank you, God. Because my guess is there's a lot of things that we can say thank you, God, about. And that is perfect timing for us to do so. There's never a bad time for us to be thanking God for the things that are working beautifully and wonderfully in our life, and that there are those things. I know sometimes I get down to, and I toss in the whole towel. I go, I just can't take it anymore. I'm just done. And I just have this feeling of just, and I start screaming, ranting, raving. And when that happens, I'm not praising the other goods that's happening in my life. In fact, what I do is I take the good around me, the people around me who would normally be very supportive and wonderful, and they go, oh boy, here he goes again, off and running. So think about that. Think about how you are appreciating all of the things around you in this moment. You know, go out for a walk today and look around. And let's just say this: if you can go out for a walk, be grateful you can go out for a walk. If you can get out of a chair, whatever you can do, be grateful for whatever activities you can engage in, and then be grateful for the things around you. It's funny, I was going through my mom's house the other day and we were moving some things around. And there were a lot of pictures that had been, stored in certain places. And I thought, you know what? In my mind lately, instead of looking at artwork, I like looking at family members and friends, pictures everywhere. So I've been flooding my walls with pictures. And in doing so, it's really wonderful because I feel a connection more than I do looking at some landscape thing. I'm looking at, and I think maybe because we haven't been able to get together as a family for the past year. And I think it's been, how difficult for friends and family to get to one another. But I think just that element of adding that gratitude of looking and seeing those pictures that bring about such great memories, that in and of itself changes how I view the beauty of my surroundings in that moment. Jeff, so true. The sky today is so blue. I am guilty of just taking it for granted. I am grateful. It is true. I tell you what, it is true. When I get up in the morning, I have a beautiful view. And there are mornings I just, I get in the shower and I'm like going about my business. But the days that I sit back for just 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and I look at something beautiful out there, and I don't take the mountains for granted. I don't take the blue sky or the way that the sun is rising on the mountains. If I take that time to really look at it, it feels like a blessing, and it feels like I'm so rich in something in that moment. When we feel blessed about anything, when we acknowledge it in that way, it really does bring about a sense of abundance and a sense of happiness and peacefulness and a calm, if only for 5 or 10 seconds. And sometimes that's all I need is 5 or 10 seconds just to reset this moment, right? Or reset what I'm doing. All right, here we go. We copy a practice from the Israelites, a practice that falls annually. Each year we have a Thanksgiving service, and many think this is to express our gratitude for the year past. If you think a moment, you can readily see that this is a reversal of the law of praise. Such a service should not be a review, but it should be a preview. That is, a true Thanksgiving service should be an expression of our faith, not in the past, but in the present and the future of that which is yet to come. Many of us have gotten into a rut. We want our pay in advance. We offer praise after our barns are well filled. If all is going well, we are willing to pause to give thanks for our good fortune. Anyone can be grateful with the gift that is already in hand. If conditions are bad, our harvest lean, or troubles besets us, we are apt to forget to praise, and we storm at our failures and often blame God for his neglect. Oh, wow. Okay, let's back our way into this, right? Vanessa says, healing from within is where we come from. Exactly, Vanessa. Thank you. So let me unpack this. Thanksgiving services, we've done this we always give thanks for the things that have happened in the past. But if you look at Thanksgiving service as an opportunity to praise that which is on its way in the next year. So Thanksgiving we looked at as a celebration of the harvest that was, but perhaps, like he says, this is a reversal, a 180, how I brought that up at the very beginning. This is a reversal of how to use the spiritual law of increase and praise. When you reverse that and you're grateful for something in advance, then the universe begins to open up avenues, because a lot of times, think about this, in Thanksgiving, you're saying, oh, this year was this, and I'm very grateful. And boy, do I hope the next year is like this, right? I have a lot of hope in that moment, but that's not knowing. When one is praising and doing this, using this kind of spiritual principle of praise, when one is praising on Thanksgiving Day, you actually are allowing things to come forward that are going to be even greater than that which you're sitting down and participating in that moment. So the human reaction is to, if I get, then I share my getting with someone, okay? But I don't share until I receive. And just like last week when we were talking about this, you have to turn that 180. It's when we give that we open up the avenue to receive. When we give of ourselves, we open up the door for something else to come in. Same thing happens here. Instead of being grateful for the things in a ceremony on a certain day of the past, let's be grateful for the present and the future of what is about to come. That's using this law of increase. All right? When one can sing praises in the face of adversity, the adversity will soon disappear. That is not a promise. That is a spiritual law. Learn to render praise, to be thankful for the good at hand, and you will have found the magic lamp of spirit. I love that. This is great stuff, right? Then he talks about the teachings of Jesus. This is what Jesus knew when he said, whatever you believe, or whatever soever you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them and you shall have them. Praise is the belief in action, and that action is in the present tense. It is in the now. Samples of his work show us how he approached his problems. In one case, he turned to the patient and asked, do you believe? To another, he questioned, do you perceive? In one of his most trying tests, that of going to the tomb where his beloved friend Lazarus lay dead, we see his approach no different. He stood apart from the mourners, and his first words of prayer were, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. What could be more thankful than at that time, for a time like that? But the master knew he was grateful for the answer to his prayer that Lazarus would be restored to life again. Directly, he called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And the book reads that Lazarus stirred in his grave clothes and returned to his body again. Now, it's a parable. That's symbolic. But the symbology is, right, if you look at the teachings of Jesus, the teachings of this spiritual leader, this master, right, the great example of teaching of Jesus. When you look at that, when he would say something, thank you, I know I have been heard, right? You have heard me, which means the quest has been registered. Let's just say it that way. Let me break it down. When Jesus said that, what it said to me is the universe has heard this and responds accordingly. There isn't a question as to whether it is heard or not. There is a belief that it already has. I know in some different religions, they pray to different entities and different saints, saviors, spirits, other things. In our science of mind, we pray into that one thing because we are that one thing. We are that in action. So we pray into it. We don't have an intermediary. We don't have some other entity that could, give us a no answer. It's just always the yes. So in the science of mind, that's what I've always liked. I didn't have to go through another system to get to God. God was already there. God's here now. All right. So I once again, I love that idea. All right. One of the first requisites of the law is that we keep ever an attitude of praise and thanksgiving. If we hope to receive of God's outpouring of good, we must keep ourselves receptive, and praise is one of the simplest means known to accomplish this. So, to keep our receptivity going, to keep the pump pumping, right? We prime the pump through praise. That's the deal. When you prime the pump through praise, expect a flood of good to come your way. All right? In a good way. And in a good way. So here we go. The law cannot fail us when we do not fail it. Learn to turn to the law of praise upon anything you are praying for, and you will see action. Praise is faith in action. A faithful law, faithfully observed, will ever reward generously the observer. The law of praise will lift you from sickness to health. It will raise you from ignorance to intelligence, from poverty to affluence, from weakness to strength, from fear to courage. In fact, the law of praise will promote you in all things and in all ways. Begin using the law now. So we talked about the law of increase. That's what the title is chapter. But it's really the law of praise. So think about that. When we talk about increase, it's synonymous with praise. I like that. Last paragraph, we're almost wrapped up. You haven't much to begin with, you say. Well, neither did Jesus when he had some 5,000 hungry souls to feed. He only had 5 loaves and a few fishes, and he did something with them. He started action by praising the little at hand and then passed it about. You know the story, and the master said that what he did, we could do. There are no exceptions with the law. How can it be done? When you learn to take what you have and build upon it, not with scorn and condemnation, but with praise and gratitude, you are working the law, and the law will give you the increase. Praise God that good is everywhere. Let me unpack that, and then we're wrapped up for the day. It was a quick class today. All right. When you learn to take what you have and build upon it, not with scorn and condemnation. So I may not have all that I want, and I may not feel like it's the best of something, but if I praise it, I can build upon it. If I condemn it, whatever you condemn will eventually be taken away from you. So you can't continue criticizing, condemning, and complaining and then be upset when whatever that is removed from you. There's nothing more difficult to listen to is the person who constantly complains about a relationship that they're in. Oh, always me. And the dialogue never changes. We all go phases up and down in relationships. If you're in a relationship, we all go through phases. But the person who's consistent story is horrible. And it's awful. And it never changes. And it's always that way. It's been that way for years. Just remember that don't be surprised when that relationship goes away. So at the end of the day, you can't go, oh my God, this person's gone out of my life. Now what am I going to do? I'm like, well, you kind of booted him out with your consciousness. You asked them to leave because you just complained and criticized the whole time. You have to praise and acknowledge. Using the law of praise is essential for this growth of an increase in your life. Praise what you have. I'm of the Dr. Tom belief. I give thanks for the things I don't have. Because there's a lot of stuff in this world I'm glad I don't have. I mean, really, I'm glad I don't have it. I'm glad I don't have those worries. I'm glad I don't have those health conditions. I'm glad I don't have this conflict in my life. So I give thanks for that. Now I give thanks for all the things that are working. And I give thanks in the present here and now moment for this here and now moment in the future, which is about to unfold. All through the process of praise. There you go. So that's the class for today, right? We're all set. Now, the next big event is on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. If you haven't done so already, Wednesday at 4 o'clock, we will go into a Zoom format and we'll have our annual congregational meeting. There's going to be a lot of stuff talked about at this meeting. By our bylaws, we have to have it. And even though we can't have it in person, we want to have it via Zoom so that we can bring you up to speed with what has happened the past year and what's going forward in the next year. Okay? So please continue to support the center generously. We operate only on the donations of those individuals who are watching these shows. So please continue to give and give generously where you get your spiritual food. We've been able to put on, we're almost up to 365. We are almost up to 365 live 10 o'clock services that we have done now for months, right? So we have done 365 one-hour shows for almost a year during this lockdown COVID period. So your center has been very much alive out there in the world. Please continue to support it. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the class today. We will see you Wednesday at we still have the classes on Tuesday and Wednesday at 10 a.m. But just call the office so you can get on the list to get the Zoom link for the congregational meeting on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Bless you. Thank you. Have a great day. Have a wonderful week. It's a beautiful week where I'm at. And I hope it's a beautiful week where you are at too. Enjoy your day. Thank you.